and things have learned to walk that ought to crawl.
So before I start this post, I will say that I was very young, but my mother recalls the experience quite clearly. I'm not really into cryptozoology at all, but I'm curious if this is a common sighting, or what exactly my mother, father, and I experienced. This was along Route 66, going from Texas into New Mexico. We were heading to my great-grandfather's funeral back in 2005, in the middle of the summer, and I was 10 at the time. The sun was starting to set, and I remember us talking. I'm eating a Happy Meal they bought me at the time, and we were just swapping stories and having a good time. They made me this little cubby-like area in the trunk for me to lay down in, color, etc. But most of the trip was spent by looking out the window, watching things pass by. While my parents were talking and the radio was on, I was just watching the world pass by. But I remember very clearly seeing a man standing and staring at cars. He wore a black trench coat, bowler or perhaps a top hat, a black beard. But the part I remember the most vividly was the bright, glowing red eyes. I pointed it out to my mum, who was distracted at the time, having not seen it. Well, a couple of hours go by, and I'm still looking out the window. I made a little game for myself to see if I could count how many birds I could spot along the way, and the sun was starting to set. Next thing I know, I see the same dude just ahead of us. But because of the dark, the eyes were a lot more intense. My mum got a little concerned about it and told my dad to speed up. Eventually, fatigue set in, and we found a rest stop. It was pitch black in there, like the kind of dark you can't even see your own feet in without a light, and we were all trying to sleep. I had to go to the bathroom, and my dad walked out with me, as I was rather freaked out from the sighting earlier, worried the guy would come grab me. As we got out of the car, I remember my father staring off into the distance. He told me to hurry up, though keeping his usual calm demeanor. When I finished and got back into the car, he started it, and we took off again, driving to stay in a motel instead. I asked him and my mother about it recently as we were reminiscing together about trips we'd taken. When I asked my dad why he had us go to a motel, he claimed it was because he saw the same pair of eyes staring at us from a hill near where we were, above a rocky outcrop. Does anyone have any ideas or stories as to what exactly this could have been? I remember the eyes so vividly, it's burned into my mind, as well as him being out in the desert heat with a heavy trench coat, and I'm not sure. My dad swears it was the devil. My mum thinks it was a chupacabra of some sorts. I myself am not sure. Any thoughts would be appreciated. As I said, this was over 19 years ago, and I haven't seen anything since, as I live far away from Route 66 now. One night in 2013, I went over to my cousin's house when I was probably about 13 to 14 years old. This was in California. We were the same age, and she had just moved in with her step-siblings and stepdad with her mum. They were in a transition moving period, and her room was basically in the living room. The only thing separating it was a curtain. It was weird, but not permanent. Me, her, Sav, and our other cousin, Trinity, were all at the kitchen table, talking about random stories. The living room and kitchen were all open. Sav's room was about 10 feet away from where we were. My cousin Sav at that time period was going through it really bad mentally. she kept having really bad sleep paralysis of these grey-looking people with greasy black hair, hugging her in her sleep and staring at her. I kept getting the feeling she had something attached to her. I've always been really spiritual, along with most of the women in my family. When I would bring it up to her, she'd get mad at me and tell me to drop it, so I did. But anyways, back to this night. It was probably about 7 p.m. and we had just ate some pizza. Me and Trinity were talking about whatever, and all of a sudden, all of the lights in the house shut off for probably 1 second and went back on again. We screamed in unison. No clue why, but I felt extremely compelled to look over to where my cousin Sav's room or curtain was, and I saw this 5'10" figure. Keep in mind, it's dark out, but not pitch black, and we had all the lights on where we were. We could see clear as day. I just remember the dead silence. I see this man, and he seemed to have old 18 to 1900s brownish attire. He had a top hat on, but his skin was just grey. It looked like someone had made a clay figure with real clay, and it had human features, but I couldn't make out what I was looking at. I just had a pit in my stomach. Like this thing wanted me to know that it did not want me there. I was in awe, staring at it for probably 5 to 10 seconds in silence. All of a sudden, I was standing there, but all I could feel was disgust, anger, fear, basically any negative human emotion. It washed over me. After I snapped back to look at my cousins, they were both pale and in shock too. To this day, they still remember it, so I know I'm not crazy. We all described the same thing, and I wanted to get out of there. I damn near started crying because I felt so uncomfortable and weirded out, and called my mum to pick me up. But she would be about an hour or two to get me, as she was with friends, and we ended up watching movies, and I fell asleep. I just remember right before how scared I was I'd see it again. I never did. Years later, I met my boyfriend whose parents described seeing a clay-textured humanoid, all grey skin, and it was the same icky feeling. Has anyone else experienced seeing something like this? This was my most vivid paranormal experience, and seriously, shook me. And when I think about it, I still cannot believe we all saw the same thing. Hand to God, this happened. Whatever it was, I saw it. My cousin had sleep paralysis dreams with the grey-skinned people, faces molded like clay, but not quite perfect. My boyfriend's family saw it. So strange. It was the 3rd day of February, 2012, in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande. It happened several years ago. My sisters, my mother and me went to have some fun at some beach very far from our home. Our mother had rented the house of a friend for a few days, which we used while going to and coming back from the beach. It was one of those very dirty beaches where trash was dumped all around and not that many people were going to it. But for us, it was very fun. I even remember joking to my sister that there are probably sharks in this beach. It was pretty hot too, and I have the skin of a vampire, so after the first day on the beach, I was looking like Mr. Krabs and had to stay in that house while they went to have fun, which for me was okay. I'm kinda introverted anyway. One day, my mother and my sisters, all except for the youngest one, had to go to some specific place. One went to color their nails, the other went to have a massage, two decided to go back to the beach, and my mum was going to a club with her friends. My young sis went to sleep, and basically, it was just me in this 2-floor house which was way bigger than the home I was raised in. The place was kind of creepy, and it did not help that the moon that day was full. So I was a young and stupid child who was scared to hell by the creepy night and also full of energy. So I jumped over the fence of our house by climbing over it. My thoughts at the time were stupid. I was going to look for my mum. I did that without thinking about stuff like the possibility of me getting kidnapped or killed by some robber. This was Brazil after all. Street crime is high as hell here. Anyway, I walked a little bit around the town, but then realized I was lost. I was utterly overwhelmed by the samey modern buildings, and I had no idea where I was. I also had no idea where my mum was. I knew where she went, but I did not know where that was. After the fear of being lost fully took over, I decided to give up and go back to the house. But I did not know where the house was, so I walked around. There were very few people at night, and I was just too anxiety-filled to ask any who I saw for directions. Eventually the road mixed with this path of dirt. It sorta looked like the path in front of the house, so I thought it was the right direction, since I took another path after getting out of the house, but there were several others which this path could lead to. So I walked, and I found a beach. Not the beach where I went with my sisters, but a beach. But little me did not know that, so I ran into the beach because I thought that I could find two of my sisters there, and they could bring me back home. However, they were not on the beach, but something else was. This beach had those rocks leading up to outside the water. You know, those spiked rocks that normally sink ships. Yeah, those ones. And one of them was all the way into the sand. I kept seeing something moving beside it from the corner of my vision, so I just looked at the rock. Then, something came out from beside the rock. This thing. It seemed to be the size of an adult guy for me. It stood straight. It had legs and feet. But it wasn't human, and the biggest proof was a left arm. You know centipedes? Those black things with 1,000 legs? Yeah, his left arm was like that. The thing extended to the ground and it moved, like it had a life of its own. I could see all the little legs moving. The whole body was weird, not just a centipede arm. You know that green guy from Nightmare Before Christmas? This man was kinda like that, but made of skin, with an egg-shaped head. I don't know what the man did after he saw me, because after seeing him in the clear moonlight with the ocean backdrop, my child self was absolutely terrified, and I just straight up bolted. I ran away as fast as I could from the beach, without looking back. Eventually, while running on the path of dirt, one of my sisters found me. It seemed like they were looking for me for a while. Once we got to the house, I got scolded to hell by my mother, who was angry as a devil with me for running away. She thought I would get kidnapped or something. I did tell this story to my sisters. Obviously, they found it to be unbelievable. In fact, the only one who believes in it is the youngest, but she also believes in all that witchcraft shit. So I guess her belief is already wonky. To be clear with you guys, I don't believe in supernatural stuff like werewolves, Bigfoot, greys, and all that stuff. I think all of it is a conspiracy theory, and stupid beliefs based on zero proof. But to this day, I believe that man thing to be real. The memory is still very vivid in my mind. So when I was younger, I went to a summer camp on Wabamun Lake in Alberta, Canada. It's in the middle of the woods. Good spot. Anyways, when I got older, there was a separate few small cabins for the older kids. Up 127 steps. I know that because they made us count. Anyways, at the top to the right there are trails to the other sites, and to the left are the cabins. 3 youth cabins on one side of the clearing, and on the other is one staff cabin. All of the cabins are on stilts that are approximately 3 to 3.5 feet in height. One door on the middle of the front, 2 windows on the front, one on either side of the door. One on either side in the middle of the building, which were behind 2 bunks, and one on the back, which was at the foot end of the rear bunk. There are 3 bunks laid widthwise on the left when you go in the door, and 2 laid lengthwise on the right with approximately 2 feet between them all. The side and back windows were in between bottom and top bunk height, but closer to the top bunks. However, the top of those windows were still 9 to 10 feet off the ground with the stilts on the bottom of the cabins. Also, there were shitty curtains that didn't cover the full window. I was on the first top bunk on the left side, with a full view of all the windows. We set up and leave for day 1. When we come back to pack up for the night, we all hop in bed and mess around like 13 to 14-year-olds do. Then, after all of that, before we decide to sleep, I have my flashlight pointed to the left of my cabin mate's head, which was closest to the right side window, feet to the front of the cabin, and we talk for a bit. When I notice at the top of the window, between the gap where the curtain doesn't cover the window, there is just something white, reflecting light back at me. And in my head, I don't really pick up that it's weird. Then, I turn my eyes to it, and before I can focus on what it is, it darts out of the window and away from the cabin. And I just feel this primal sense of dread overwhelm me. I go apeshit, like a scared 13-year-old does. However, before I can calm down, my other cabin mate sees something in the top left corner of the back window and starts losing his shit as well. Once we calm down and people are asking us what we saw, we both described the same thing. Something white that moved out of the way as we saw it and scared us beyond belief for no reason. What messes with me to this day, however, is that it was on the top of the window. Therefore, whatever it was must have had to have been at least 9 to 10 feet tall. We did not see it again that night. On the second night, some of the other boys who thought we were just messing with them convinced us to go outside that night with them to look around and see if we can find it, which completely terrified myself and the other guy that had seen it. We're all looking with our flashlights about 60 feet down the trail near the cabin when, behind a tree, maybe 150 feet away from myself and 3 of my cabin mates, I see an extremely pale, lanky figure with what looked like antlers stride into the left diagonally away from us, extremely fast and absolutely silent. It had no visible hair either. All 4 of us ran as fast as our little legs could carry us back to the cabin, and once everyone was in, we locked the door and jumped in bed, all while losing our shit. A couple of us were crying from it. A counselor came to check on us to ask why we were being so damn loud. When we explained what had happened, he just thought we were messing with him. So he told us to go to sleep and stop being so loud. I didn't see it again that night, but a couple of others did. Same reaction pretty much as everyone else had. Nothing on the 3rd day, but on the 4th night, we heard screaming in the woods about a half hour after myself and the guy in the bunk beside me on the left saw it in the right side window at the same time. Nobody moved or went to check. We heard our counselor leave his cabin and look around for us with his flashlight for 2 minutes, and after he came to our cabin and looked inside. When he noticed that we were all inside and awake, the speed of the way his face went from anger to terror was almost instant. He just said, "Lock the door," before sprinting to his cabin and doing the same. The next morning we noticed scratches on the door of our cabin and his, which is strange because I didn't sleep for longer than maybe 2 hours that night, if that. Okay, so does that sound like anything to you guys? I've tried so hard to find an explanation to what this could have been. Like a Fleshgate or Skinwalker, Wendigo. I'm in Alberta, so I don't think it could have been a Fresno nightcrawler. Also, because when I saw it, it had arms, and Fresno nightcrawlers don't have arms. This happened when I was about 17 years old. 24 female, in northern Louisiana, USA. Even though it's been a while, lately, I keep thinking about it. Like, literally, I can't sleep, because I just keep wondering if it really happened, and weirdly, I also have been wondering how he's doing. For extra context, I did not do any drugs this night. I'd been to dinner and movie with a friend, and we didn't drink either. Seriously, stone cold sober. So the story starts here. I met up with an old friend for dinner. It was a Saturday, early evening. We decided to go to a movie downtown. Downtown was usually not busy, but on Saturdays, you expect a bit more people than there were there. The movie theater is across from a public building with a bathroom that's extra nice, so we decided to go there first. It has loft apartments there, and I clocked a guy in the lobby just looking straight down at his phone. I clocked him because he's a man, and we're young girls. His build was probably about 5'10", if I had to guess, and he had a super regular body, not like fat or skinny, just super average guy. I couldn't really see his face, but I noticed him when we walked into the lobby from the bathroom, and he walked at a don't hold the door distance away from us, and also went to the movies. So me and my friend sit at the top middle seats for the movie. About 5 rows down was an older couple, and literally the rest of the room was just empty seats. He then comes in, still staring at his phone. It was so weird. You couldn't fully make out his face, even though his phone was bright. But of course, I wasn't trying to stare at this person, just wanted to not get kidnapped. He seemed close to our age, 19 to 22-ish, but you never know. So he comes and sits in our row, at the very far left end. Arguably, a pretty terrible spot choice, with so many options available. He proceeds to stare at his phone, brightness on full, for the entire length of the movie. I was a little nosy at this point, sue me, but I looked over at him from time to time throughout the film, just glancing to see what was so important on his phone because it was bright, and I don't know, this situation was weird. It was a bright white screen, and he wasn't clicking or playing or doing anything but just holding his phone. And I don't know, that's just actually it. So movie ends, we go to leave. I'm holding the door open for the older couple. He's behind them, so I decided to stay, holding the door. As he gets closer, he looks up at me, so I smiled at him and his face looked regular at first. Pretty attractive actually. But when he smiled, his smile changed very quickly into his whole face. Like it was such a huge smile. It did not feel real at all. Not like a creepy movie way, or someone with a big mouth, but not like a human. And his eyes flashed. I don't know, but they were just different. I guess my face looked immediately shocked, because then his eyes went back to normal, and he looked normal, but his facial expression was like he was embarrassed or caught out, and he looked back down at his phone and continued to walk past me through the door. So I followed him as he walked around me, meaning I did a 270 turn around to watch him walk away, and by the time I'd spun around, he was actually literally gone. I'm saying he was very close to me walking by, and I spun while he was walking. And also, we were in a fairly quiet downtown. even if this man started running away, there was no alley to run down, and I just would have seen him running or walking. I even walked out a ways to see if he hid behind a parked car, which there was like only 2. There's actually more. If anyone wanted to know, he was dressed in a white shirt, denim jeans, denim jacket, and had medium brown hair. His skin was not super pale, just like medium, regular white guy skin tone. There's more though, so I snapped back to reality, thinking that was insane. Am I crazy? Also, I need to drive my friend back to her car. So we leave, I drop her off, and then I head home. About my drive home, the last 7 minutes of my drive is a flat highway. Speed limit is 55. Trees on either side with some breaks in between. There is a larger area before turning into my neighborhood. There are 2-ish lights to the right side that are red and white. I don't know what they are, just airplane towers or something. They are always there. I know where. I recognize them. Okay, so I'm on that last stretch, and just before, I was noticing that it really is a super calm, quiet Saturday. Like there were no cars passing by, and it was pretty still outside. Around the 7th minute zone, I see this big white ball of light up by my neighborhood, seeming like in the middle of the road. So I kept driving, being like, what is that? As I got closer, it seemed that it was pretty close to the road, but actually it was above it. I mean, directly above the street, not in the field to the right where those poles are in the distance. As I pulled up to the left turn into the neighborhood, I just parked. There was this massive aircraft just silently hovering above the road, about the height of the pine trees maybe. Not near the trees though. The trees are more in my neighborhood. I just stared at it, mouth open probably. I could only see the undercarriage of it, and it looked like an isosceles triangle, and seemed to have sheet metal panel looking things. I'd have to imagine that's not what it was, but that's what it looked like, with little dots where I imagine bolts to be. It felt like he was in it. Okay, so I know it was 11-ish when I left the theater, and maybe 11:55 to 12:05 when I got home. It's about a 30-minute drive to my house, so I must have sat there for a good little bit just staring. No wind or noise. I finally decided to turn into my neighborhood. It moved to the left of my neighborhood and stayed just outside of the tree line. The only way I can describe the movement would be like gliding. Once at the tree line, it just moved slowly, like it was just wanting to watch me drive the rest of the way home, or some particular interest. Actually, when I got home, I got out of my car and looked through the trees. I can see the white and red towers that are always there, and then this white light right where it was, by the tree line before I went too deep into the neighborhood. It stayed there. I finally went inside around 12:15, and I just ran to my parents and was like, what type of plane can make no wind or sound that might do testing here? Like, we literally started Googling. Couldn't figure it out. Went to bed. Felt like I was being watched all night and for several days after that. Checked the next night, and there was no light, except the ones that are always there. And every so often since then, I've thought of him. I feel bad if I hurt him by the reaction on my face. Anyway, any info about this, or other similar encounters, is much appreciated. I don't know what I'm trying to do, but I just can't sleep, because I keep wondering if I'm insane, if it really happened. It feels like I'm supposed to not remember it, or maybe it's just starting to fade. But I have doubts until I run through the story again, and I'm just like, no, I saw it. It was wild, you know? Anyway, thank you. If you listen this far, I appreciate you. And again, any info is helpful. Thanks. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you have a story to share, please send it to my email in the description below. This channel is mostly made up of stories sent in by viewers or people they know. Another way to support the channel is to sign up for my Patreon, where you can watch my videos ad-free. More perks will be added in the new year. Also, I will be adding new designs to the merch store, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for your continuous support. And remember,
Papa loves you.